Hey, Jeremiah here, trapping today, and in this video we're going to do an overview of the fur market and fur market report slash forecast for 2023. And this is being recorded January 2023. So if you keep that in mind, if things change as sometimes happens a few months from now, just keep that in mind that there may be other updates that are more relevant. But for now, this is pretty much where we're at. And to be honest, the fur market, the state of the market has not changed since we went into trapping season in the northern states this past fall, and it's not likely to change for at least another couple of months. And we'll get into that a little bit, but needless to say, I write a fur market report slash forecast every year on trappingtoday.com, and I usually try to do that in the fall, so people, as they get ready for trapping season, they can kind of prepare. I have not done anything for YouTube for this year, so I was a little bit behind on doing that. But you can go to trappingtoday.com and check out the report. I actually noticed the other day somebody made a fur market video on YouTube, and essentially what the video was reading, this person read word for word my fur market report on trappingtoday.com in the video. So that was kind of odd, and that made me think that when you rather hear the report on a YouTube video from the guy that wrote it, maybe I can provide a little bit more insight into that, and I'll provide some updates that it may have changed since the last time since I wrote this report. But again, not a whole lot has changed. So anyway, I am going to get into it, and we'll talk first about the overall macro broad factors that influence the fur market, and then we'll get into the smaller details, and then we'll talk about individual species and what we can expect for the market for each species and prices that you might be able to expect. And remember, fur prices vary significantly from region to region and from the time of year that the animal is caught and how it's handled. So keep in mind the prices that I'm going to be quoting are going to be for dried, fleshed, stretched, and dried pelts. So if you're selling something green or in the round on the carcass, the prices are going to be different for those items. And if you're selling something tanned, it's going to be way different. So fur market macro overall, we have a number of things at play right now, but the number one thing to understand is the fur market these days is an international market. It's a global market. And many decades ago, and when the fur market was kind of more in its earlier stages in North America, it was primarily driven by, there was some overseas demand, but it was driven by a very strong consumer base domestically in the United States. So fur was a fashion item. Fur was worn by people in the major cities. It was something that was just normal, everyday occurrence for people to wear fur. It was what you did. It was what you wore. If you look back in old movies from the 1930s and 40s, you'll see people wearing fur all over the place. It was a big deal. It was normal. That has changed. That the fashion trends have shifted. It was a combination of the change in just overall trends from a society standpoint that didn't have anything to do with animals, combined with the strong lobbying and influence of animal rights groups that wanted to ban the use of fur. So they wanted to ban trapping. They wanted to eliminate the market for fur, thus eliminate the amount of animals that are going to be trapped. It was folly in a lot of ways. Number one, the number of animals that are going to die is going to be the same no matter what. They're either going to be killed by trappers and worn as fur items, or they're going to die from overpopulation, from disease, or society is not going to accept really high densities of animals in urban rural interface, and animals that cause problems are going to be eliminated, and people are going to be paid to kill those animals and in most cases the fur is not going to be used. So that's really a sad thing. And the other thing is we went away from fur just about the time we should have been moving towards more use of fur, because fur is not only is an incredibly valuable item for clothing, it's also, and it's super luxurious, but it's also incredibly warm, and it's natural, biodegradable, and sustainable. And we've replaced all these fur items with petroleum products, with plastics, polyesters, and all kinds of different synthetics, which are great. They keep you comfortable, they keep you warm, but they are not biodegradable and natural. They will sit in landfills for hundreds of years. So we've got that going on. But basically what all that is to say, the primary consumers of the fur we produce today is not the United States. The primary consumers are in countries like Russia, China, Ukraine, South Korea, Greece, areas like that, places where fur is still fashionable, fur is still a status symbol in society, and people are just wearing fur is normal. You don't get someone dump paint on you for wearing a fur coat in a city. If you go into some of the regions in China, people wearing fur coats all over the place. So our fur prices are highly dependent on demand from those countries worldwide. A number of factors that influence that demand include those countries' economies. It includes the weather, how cold it is, because cold winters sell more fur. And it includes the relationship between different currencies of different countries. And basically, to put it simply, every single factor that is at play here has been working against a decent fur market for the last couple of years. And we kind of hit the perfect storm recently, where the war in Ukraine has interrupted economies of Russia and Ukraine. It's interrupted people's lives. It has changed the way Russia does business with most of the developed world, and how we trade or don't trade with Russia. And Russia is a big consumer of fur, so that's a big deal. At the same time, the COVID lockdowns in China have changed Chinese consumers, because they've been sitting at home for the last 2 years. And they have not been able to leave their homes and go out and about and go out to dinner and go shopping and buy fur and wear fur and spend time outside where they'd be wearing fur. So there really hasn't been, demand has been almost nil. It's been almost zero for fur in China. China is starting to open up now, so that's an encouraging thing. But it has not yet, that reopening of China has not yet worked its way into an improved price for fur items that I can see yet. And there are some major underlying factors in the Chinese economy, in the Chinese society, in China as a country that over the long term are going against it. It's primarily the demographics of China are not looking good. They are their population has stopped growing and it's starting to decline. So they're starting to shrink. They're having more deaths than they are having births. And this has been going on for a while. People have been speculating about it, but the data is finally out, and they have finally admitted that the data, they miscounted their population, they overcounted, and the predictions about tipping over from population growth to population decline were not nearly as dire as the reality. So that's coming. The Chinese economy it may continue to be strong for a while, but it's headed in one direction and it's not good. The Russian economy is not looking good either. So we're going to have a hard time finding major markets to take our fur. That's the demand side, and I think demand is the number one factor driving fur prices. Supply is important, but supply and demand don't play an equal role here in fur prices. That's important to consider. Fashion trends and overall demand from fur consuming countries and fur consuming areas is really what's driving this market, and that is down. Supply is down as well, where people are not trapping as many animals because the prices are so low and because fuel and other expenses are so high. But that reduction in supply isn't nearly as important to the prices as this massive shift in demand. As far as ranch fur production for fur farms, mink and fox primarily, that has declined substantially as well. But there's so much fur that has still not been worked its way through the system, has not been consumed on the other end, that it comes from all of these mink ranches and fox ranches reducing their numbers and pelting out. There's just a huge glut of supply still on the market because nothing's really moved that much. So that's kind of what's going on in the broad overall picture with the market. But let's look at some individual items and see where maybe, we know the market's not good. I kept saying that we can only go up from here, which I think is probably true. However, we could also go sideways for a very long time, and we've been going sideways for about the last 3 years, and it has been kind of frustrating to watch this market just kind of churn and just go steady without really going any direction. The good news is we probably hit a base for most items. And hopefully, eventually, we'll see some sort of a comeback. But overall, in the long term, my opinion has shifted in the past couple of years to where I really am starting to doubt that we're ever going to see a real boom in fur again. So I hope I'm wrong, but keep that in mind. So let's talk about individual species. The first one I want to talk about is coyote. And this is probably the most important one because coyote prices have changed far more than any other species that I'm going to talk about over the past year to 2 years. And I'd been talking about this for a long time because last year there were indications, about 2 years ago, Canada Goose announced that they were going to stop buying fur to use as trim on their expedition parkas, which were a very popular fashion item and utility. I mean, those fur parkas, the fur-lined hoods, and the Canada Goose parkas were extremely popular for a long time. They were big fashion, and that was kind of where the North American market was actually starting to consume some fur, and we were consuming a lot of coyotes here in the United States for those Canada Goose parkas. As any fashion trend tends to go, it wasn't going to last forever, but the question was, when was it going to end? And Canada Goose is a publicly traded company. For a long time, they said, well, we're only buying fur that's harvested sustainably by legal licensed trappers following regulations in their states. We're going to stick with that. Well, as a publicly traded company, they have to answer to shareholders and members of the board of directors, and there was a move among a lot of shareholders, as I understand it, as well as a move among PETA and the animal rights groups to really push Canada Goose away from using fur. And unfortunately, they finally gave in, and they announced they're going to stop using fur and they're going to phase it out over a couple of years. Well, the writing was on the wall. This was going to happen. We all kind of saw it coming, but it took a while for any change to occur on the demand side at the trapper level. And so the way this works is you've got Canada Goose buying fur from some major fur buyers. Then you've got smaller fur buyers that are they're buying fur out in the country in all kinds of different areas. And they're buying local coyotes. Then they're gathering those together. They're bringing them to regional bigger buyers and they're selling to them. Those guys have contracts with Canada Goose. And that's kind of how the whole market kind of worked. And there were, at the same time, there were also a lot of other buyers outside of Canada Goose that were taking advantage of this fashion trend those parkas were like $800 to $1,000, the cheaper ones. They're very expensive parkas, and there were a number of companies that decided to make a little bit lower end. They use a less quality coyote, or they'd cut a few corners here and there. Or some of them would be just as good, but they just didn't have the Canada Goose brand name on them. They were knockoffs, but they were in demand too, and so that whole trend, that whole fashion trend, was really pushing that coyote market. But it was clear that it was going to change, and there were a number of people, particularly in the western states, as well as fur harvesters. And I love the guys at Fur Harvesters. They've advertised with me in the past. I send fur there all the time, and I think they do an excellent job. But I think they kind of, it's hard to say, but I think they kind of missed the mark here. And they announced in their fur market forecast that there was going to be lots of demand for coyotes still. There was going to be lots of buyers. Don't worry about it. The coyote market's still strong, despite what you've heard. Well, people sent coyotes, a lot of coyotes, to fur harvesters, to the auction. And at the same time, I was talking to people, and I was really in the podcast and the fur market updates. And I was saying, I think this is going to crash. I just do not see, and I'm not an expert, but everything that I could see pointed to a big crash. And I felt like the people that were still thinking coyotes were going to sell for good money were going to be potentially left holding the bag. So it was not a good situation. Indeed, it did crash. It completely crashed, and coyotes were either not sold at all, or they're sold for really rock bottom prices. So it's too bad it had to work out that way, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. But that's the market. That's the chance that we all take, and I'm sure those people really expected the market to continue, and were hopeful, but it just didn't work out. So coyotes have crashed. Those coyotes that were bringing those heavy western coyotes, the silky coyote pelts with nice white clear bellies and just the pale colors from Montana, Wyoming, Dakotas, those were going for $70 to $100 on average. Those dropped to maybe $30 to $40 is what we're looking at right now for those coyote pelts. If there's any quality issues, you're not going to get the $30 or $40 for them. The rest of the coyotes in the country are going to be the southern coyotes, the Midwest. You're probably looking at $10 to $15. Some of the thicker pelts, the pelts that are a little more from northern climates but don't have the colors and they don't have the soft fur texture like the Northeast, like where I'm at in Maine, our coyotes are probably going to bring $15 to $20. You might see $25 in some cases, but $15 to $20 for them, $10 to $15 on the lower end. There's some buyers are not even going to buy coyotes at all. They might give you $5 for a coyote. So that market's gone. I don't know if it'll come back, and if it does, in what form. But that's unfortunate because there's tons of coyotes running around. And in my area right now, we got snow on the ground, we got crust on the snow, and the deer are breaking through the crust, and the coyotes are chasing deer, and they're killing deer. So it's unfortunate that there's no incentive for people. There's not as much incentive for people to shoot those, harvest those coyotes, and keep their populations in check. But that's the way the world works. So let's move on to muskrats. Muskrat pelts there's still demand for rats. The harvest, from what I can tell, is way down, and the demand it's weaker. It's okay. I'm thinking that we're probably, I predicted last fall $2 to $3. I've heard of some places rats going for $1.50 to $2, but I think overall that there's a little bit of nervousness there, but it seems to be $2 to $3 seems to be pretty good bottom on muskrat pelts. They don't usually go much lower than that for decent pelts. So that's what I'm gonna expect by the time the major fur sales kind of roll around, which I should mention as I record this, The major state fur auctions are kind of just getting underway in most places, and Fur Harvester's big auction isn't going to take place for another 2 months. It's going to be in March, and so that Fur Harvester's auction is the one big major auction of the year. It is going to be held in Canada, and all the border restrictions from COVID in Canada are lifted, and now buyers from all over the world can come to Canada and bid on fur and actually look at the fur that they're bidding on. So I think that is going to help for the buyers who are looking for fur. They're probably going to be willing to buy there. How much are they going to be willing to pay? That's yet to be seen. But I will say that I think there's going to be we're going to see some things move. So rats, I think by the time it all shakes out, hopefully we'll be at $2-3. Raccoon's another thing that China has traditionally purchased a ton of raccoon, a large portion of the raccoon that are harvested. The raccoon harvest used to be much higher than it is today, but people are still harvesting raccoons. The best quality raccoons are going to have a market. They are moving, but they're not moving at very great prices. The low quality raccoons and the smaller raccoons are not going to be sellable. Any smaller raccoons, like this one I got here that we caught by the house with my kids, this little raccoon has no value. Okay, I went through the process of skinning it and doing all that because the kids like it and they want to. My middle son wants to get it tanned, and so we're gonna spend a bunch of money and get it tanned, and he'll have something to hang on the wall in his room, and we're all gonna enjoy having that fur around. But there's virtually no market. The biggest and best prime undamaged Iowa raccoon, or good Wisconsin or raccoon from the Midwest, those northern states in that part of the country, $10 to $15. I think you could get. Your averages on raccoon are pretty consistently going $5 to $8 on pretty good raccoons, XL and up. So it's not a great market, but there is a market. I say it's okay. It's pretty decent because we've had 2-3 years of really, really poor market for raccoons. So from a historical perspective, it's absolutely terrible. But for what we've seen recently, we're selling raccoons. Grunwald Fur and Wool is buying a lot of raccoons. They always have, and they're kind of moving. They're starting to move them in China, which is okay. But I mean, not a ton. Nothing like they used to. Move on to beaver. So the beaver market has been low for quite a while as well. The average beaver pelt in North America is probably going to sell for between $10 and $13. Okay, so not great. The beaver market goes into two different places. The lower quality beavers go to the hatter market. Those pelts are ground up, and the fur is turned into a felt that's used to make cowboy hats. Okay, so those they don't require a really thick, luxurious pelt. The colors don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a top quality beaver pelt. They purchase on weight, and so basically, it doesn't matter where in the country it comes from. They're going to buy it, but the price is never going to go above about $10 or $12 a beaver. For on average, you might get a little more for the bigger ones. The small ones you might get like $5 or less. So that's the hatter market. It's a good thing we have that market. If we didn't have it, we'd be in a lot of trouble with beaver pelts. However, the top quality beaver are actually doing pretty well. There is a market for them. It's a very limited market though, and so it doesn't take a lot of pelts to kind of saturate that market. But there is a market there for coats and for other items that are made out of beaver. Those are typically going to be what they call a shearable beaver that have really thick underfur and have nice guard hairs, and those beaver are going to sell well. The real dark ones and the real unique, the ones that are like the top of the top, those will sell at fur harvesters. They'll probably average anywhere between $25 and $30, and you may see a few lots that go for the $30 to $40 range on the very best. But that's a very, very small percentage of the beavers, and the vast majority of the beavers that are going to go through the auction or get bought by a private fur buyer. Grunwald is looking for beavers. They're telling people to trap beavers. They have a market, but their top end is $20 that they're advertising, and that's for like the super blanket beavers and the best of the best. And so the vast majority of what they're buying is probably going to be $10 or $12. Maybe 15 if you got a really good collection, but your averages are going to be 10 or 12 on beaver for the most part. So expect that, yeah, that's kind of with the market. Beaver market has traded sideways forever. The one saving grace for the beaver market has been the beaver castor has sold really well for a long time. That market has provided prices of around $100 per pound average at auction for beaver castor, and local buyers were paying $60 to $80 a pound. That was really good for beaver trappers. In some cases, they were making more money from the castor than they did from the beaver pelt, which is kind of crazy. But that market is starting to soften. It's weakening. That's kind of, it's been dropping a little bit, come back up, drop a little bit. It's looking like we may be downwards of like $40 to $60 average in the country for beaver castor. And the auction houses may be a little more than 60 to 80 maybe. We'll just have to wait and see. It's really, the auction's really going to tell the story here, because we don't really know we know demand is weakening, but we don't know where the breaking point is and how much supply it's going to take for that demand to be filled and for the buyers to kind of run out of steam, and then who knows where the price is going to go. So it's still good. I mean, from considering the last 20 years of castor prices, we're still in a good place, but that market is dropping. So it's not all good things last forever, just like the coyote pelts. What else we got? There is a chance that castor demand kind of comes back, and we see, depending on how the supply comes in, there are certain people that need castor for flavorings, food flavorings, for perfumes, there's a wide variety for lure making. There's lure makers use castor. There's a wide variety of uses for castor, and so it only takes increased demand in one or two of those areas to see the market, and it's totally unrelated to the fur market. A lot of these demands for castor, so that could, we could see good prices back to where they were, but all indications are pointing down. Otter are selling. There's good demand for otter, but they are at low prices. The days of $50 to $100 otter are over, and I'm predicting $15 to $25 otter, maybe $30 for some good quality pelts, but 15 to 25 is about what we're going to see. Martin are holding up right now, similar to last year's prices, which was for the Alaskan and Canadian northern martin that are really good quality and larger and tend to be darker in color, $30 to $60, maybe $40 to $60 on average. That's been holding up so far. Our martin in the Northeast and in the Western Rocky Mountain states, we're looking at $20 to $30 on average. And so far, that's been the market. But with martin, I suspect there's room for upside. And the reason I'm speculating on that is because of the situation with Russia and interruptions in trade with Russia. So Russia provides a lot of sable pelts, which is essentially it's marten. It's the equivalent to our American marten is the Russian sable. And I don't know buyers and sellers of Russian sable, so I'm only speculating, but I would suspect that with a large number of trappers and producers of sable fur potentially fighting a war in Ukraine, being drafted to go over there and fight, and with a large number of countries that no longer want to do business with Russia, and with the issues with the potential economic meltdown in Russia as a result of the war, which we haven't seen yet, but we possibly could, I suspect that the production and export of Russian sable might be hugely interrupted. And if that's the case, then we're going to see people who were buying Russian sable who really need that type of product start looking at our marten. And that provides a tremendous upside potential for marten pelts. I just don't know if it's going to happen or materialize, because it could, things could go just fine and Russia could ship a bunch of marten sable pelts to China, and China could send them to another country that normally bought them from Russia. We don't know how all that works. So it's just speculating. We'll have to wait and see. Fisher, $20 to $30 for Fisher. And again, I think there's a lot of potential for upside. Really good quality Fisher, you can get 40 at auction, and potentially more than that from a private buyer if they have a special use for it. But on average, you include the lighter, the darker, the large, the small, the males, the females, you're probably looking $20 to $30 with a lot of room for upside this year. Bobcats, the Western Bobcats, the top quality cats, used to go for $700 to $1,000 in their heyday. Russia consumed a lot of those. The people that actually had a lot of money in Russia, it's a very fashionable item to make very luxurious fur coats with white fur, white with black spotted bellies, that fur that the Bobcats produced. Those $700 average pelts are now a couple hundred, $200 to $300. They may drop in the $150 range depending on how the market goes. So they're still much better than the average Bobcat, but the price has declined pretty considerably. And then outside of that western region that has the top quality cats, the drop-off is pretty substantial. But there's been a pretty good floor of the Bobcat market in a lot of the auctions at about $60. If you got a really low quality cat, I would still expect $30. So $30 to $60. You may get over 60 for some of like the Canadian Bobcats that are a little thicker pelts but don't quite have the colors that the Western Western states have. So yeah, there's a lot of variability in cats, but I would expect averages in the lower 48. We'd probably be close to $60 with a lot of room, a lot of wiggle room around that. Red fox, gray fox, $10 on average probably. There just doesn't seem to be much demand for them, unfortunately. Skunks, I had figured early in the season skunks are going to be $5 or so, maybe like $10 at a local auction. But the strength of the local demand for skunks has persisted, and the supply doesn't seem to be coming in as consistently. And we've been seeing $10 to $15 averages on skunks. So there's something you can maybe go after that's pretty easy to catch, and you're at least going to get $5 for it. You pull a little essence out of it. Skunk essence is still going for between $16 and $30, depending on wholesale versus retail. So yeah, skunks are pretty good. They're a limited market, but there's a market there. And then after that, we get outside of what most people trap. weasels, maybe a couple bucks for weasels, maybe a little better for some of the higher quality of the bigger weasels. And then, you know, you got stuff like wolves and wolverine. They're always in limited supply, and there's always demand for them. $250 to $500 average on that stuff. Canada lynx, hopefully will be around $60, 60 plus. But we'll just have to wait and see how they play out and how the bobcat market plays out. So that's pretty much it for my view on the fur market moving forward. Things could change quite a bit, but really the days when we knew what the fur market was going to do in September or October prior to the trapping season, those days are over. We're not knowing until the end of the season, the following spring at times, before we really get an idea and a handle on the market. And even then, a lot of those auctions aren't clearing out all of the fur because there's been such limited demand, so you don't get a true market price because all of the fur is not sold. If only 20% of the fur is sold, you can't get an idea of, you know, what the true price and true value is of that fur. So yeah, check out Fur Harvesters for the March auction. Keep an eye on that. I'll probably provide an update when that takes place. And check out Grunwald Fur and Wool Company's YouTube channel. They do live fur buying on, they'll do Facebook Live, YouTube Live buying fur, and you'll get an idea of some prices that they're paying as well. And I hope that helps you guys. And hopefully we'll see, always hope for better things, but I hope, if nothing else, this wasn't an encouragement to you, but I hope that it at least gave you a little bit of reality on what's going on in the fur market. Till next time, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you later.